Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll just wait a couple of seconds. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you can please drop your name and your organization in the chat. Thank you. We'll get started soon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'll get started soon. Okay, let's get started, everyone. Hello again, everyone. Thank you for coming and thank you for joining us today. My name is Wendy Estrada. I am the Director of the Immigration Legal Services. We are recording this so we may be able to share it late after. Okay, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We have a great lineup today of speakers, and we want to go ahead and get started. Before I introduce them, I want to remind folks again that we are being recorded. We have enabled the Q&A question, so if you can please drop your questions so we can track them rather than in the chat. We ask everyone to please stay muted during this conversation to enable everyone to be able to hear and participate. All right, today we are hosting, sorry. Today, we are hosting this webinar entitled What Nonprofit Workers Need to Know to provide our partners and community some guidance and information about how to respond to upcoming shifts in the new presidential administration. As a reminder, no one knows what's going to happen exactly, right? But we do know there have been many promises and comments made that make our immigrant community nervous and unsure. Today's webinar brings four experts in their respective fields who are here to share some updates, but most importantly, remind us of what rights and options exist for us right now in this very moment. We want to empower our community to know what to do and how to better support our community. And we know that today's experts will help us better understand how to do that. Our speakers today include Dulce Guzman, the Executive Director of Alianza Americas, who will update us on immigration policies and proposals. We also have John De Lozano, an employment law attorney who is representing in his personal capacity and will share information on workers' rights. We also have Michelle Garcia, Deputy Legal Director of ACLU Illinois, who will provide some guidance on rights as individuals. And Dr. Beatriz Medina from Sina Health. Dr. Medina will provide some pointers on mental health as we enter somewhat an anxious time. Let's get started with Dulce. Thank you, Dulce.
Thank you so much, Wendy. As Wendy shared, I'm Dulce Guzman. I'm the Executive Director of Alianza Americas. We are a national organization, 58 member organizations that represent Latin American and Caribbean immigrant communities based in 18 states in the U.S. Alianza Americas focuses on a transnational approach to issues that impact immigrants of Latin American and Caribbean origin. Today, I have a difficult job of sharing some potential updates on what we might be seeing under the Trump administration. As Wendy rightfully said, this is all based on remarks and policy proposals that we have heard the incoming Trump administration make about their priorities for 2025 and beyond. We do not have a crystal ball. We will not have a lot of clarity on what exactly will be happening until Monday on Inauguration Day. So these next slides are kind of just to give an overview of what we have been hearing and what we have been preparing for. Next slide, please. I want to start out just by kind of giving a little overview of how we've kind of structured some of the updates as they are relevant specifically to your work as nonprofit service sector professionals. So we want to talk a little bit about potential day one actions that we might see. We also want to talk about stripping of work authorization and deportation protections, because I think that's something that we will immediately be seeing, and probably a lot of questions that you all have been receiving. We will also be talking about increase in interior enforcement, because that is also something very relevant to local communities. And we'll touch a little bit on public charge. Next slide, please. So I first want to talk a little bit about the different actions and processes that we might be seeing immigration policy being made. The first is through executive order and presidential proclamation, which is probably what we will be seeing immediately on day one. And this is a power that the president has to impact policy. They're implemented quickly and they don't require congressional approval. They can be challenged in court and can be changed with the start of a new administration. So things that, were relevant under the first Trump administration, many of them were rescinded under Biden. So with President-elect Trump coming in on Monday, we will also be seeing a lot of rescinding of Biden policies and replacement with executive orders from Trump. The second is legislation. This is the most comprehensive use of policy. It's passed through Congress. It's the most stable form of policy change as well. Laws can change, but it goes through a very lengthy process. We will also might be seeing changes through the regulation process, which regulations are drafted by federal agencies like the Department of Homeland Security or the Department of Justice, et cetera. They should be published for public comment, allowing the public to comment on them for about 30 to 60 days before they are finalized. These must be directly connected to interpretation and implementation of existing law. So this can't be something new. It has to be directly related to something that is already federal law. The next is agency policies and memos. So leaders of federal agencies like USCIS, ICBP might issue agency policy or memos, and these are internal directives that give agency employees direction on how to implement their jobs. Like, for example, and we'll talk about it a little bit later in the presentation, who is a priority for deportation. And lastly, the judicial court system, which was very pivotal during the first Trump administration, seems to be a little bit more challenging this time around. But the court system reviews challenges to laws, executive actions, and regulations. They can decide to uphold, block, or mandate changes to specific policies as well. So I just wanted to provide a little bit micro overview of the different ways that immigration policy changes might be enacted. Next slide, please. So some potential day one actions. We have heard Trump say that he is looking to declare a national emergency, which would be which he did use in 2017 after Congress denied him funding for the wall. So we know that he has used this before and is looking to use this again in order to, one, close the border, and two, reallocate resources to support enforcement and his deportation plans. We have also heard him say the ending of birthright citizenship. He has said that he wants to end this via executive order on day one, which would mean any baby born after this action would need to have at least one parent that is an LPR or US citizen. Experts have already stated that this would clearly violate the 14th Amendment citizenship clause, so he could try it. I don't think we should throw out anything that he is saying. I think we should take it very seriously. However, we should understand that there are specific policies and rights in the Constitution that protect people in the U.S., and therefore it would be something that will be challenged and would be hard for him to actually do. And then the next is changes to ICE priorities and sensitive location memos. So as I had mentioned, leaders of these agencies have the ability to issue guidance to the employees of these agencies on how they should be operating. So currently, ICE has been operating under a memo that sets specific priorities of individuals who are priorities for expedited removal, as well as provides guidance on sensitive locations where ICE enforcement should not take place. This can change on day one with changes to the guidance in that memo. And we have already heard some guidance on or some intentions by the Trump administration to no longer see churches, schools, libraries, and other public spaces as sensitive locations. So we will probably be seeing more of that guidance changing on day one. Next slide, please. The next area that I want to talk about is stripping immigration protections from non-citizens. There are currently approximately 6.3 million undocumented persons with some sort of temporary protection like TPS or DACA holders, parole status, asylum seekers who have pending cases. Currently, DACA Recently, the Fifth Circuit Court heard arguments on DACA in October 2024. A decision is expected in the coming months and will likely then go to the Supreme Court, where it is very likely to agree to end the program. Trump might also use executive action immediately to end advanced parole. So those are some of the things that we might see in the near future. TPS has also been a program that has been specifically under attack by the Trump administration and their plans for their next role. TPS was established to congressional legislation, and only Congress can permanently act to terminate the program. It is a very careful process that evaluates the conditions of the country before making an opinion. These designations are published in the Federal Registrar, which brings legal implications. There will be challenges if Trump tries to cancel TPS designations. Next slide, please. Now I want to talk a little bit about increase in interior enforcement because this is very directly related to the on-the-ground work and questions people that are coming into your offices might be having. We likely will be seeing more use of 287G agreements that would designate local police to act as immigration enforcement agents. In Illinois, the Trust Act and the Illinois Way Forward Act specifically has provisions in place that prohibits police cooperation with ICE. We will also likely see, we've heard Trump talk about deploying the National Guard and other military assets. And the way that he's thinking about doing this is again through emergency powers. These are some things that are scary when we hear them, but again, we just won't know what actually will take place until the administration comes into office next week. We have not heard whether people will be agents will be going door to door. What we probably will be seeing, as we've already started to see this week, is very high profile workplace raids. I think that what we've seen is that the Trump administration is looking for just messaging and how to use fear as a way to control our communities. So how that exactly will take place will be dependent on what we see coming next week. Congress can also pass legislation that further criminalizes immigrants that would increase interior enforcement without due process. For example, the Senate is currently debating the Laken Riley Act, which is proposing to alter immigration policy to disproportionately react to minor offenses committed by undocumented persons and expand immigration detention. And it would also give power to state attorneys generals to sue the federal government over immigration policies and decisions, which would be very dangerous and chaotic. Those are some of the things that we're seeing that could potentially increase interior enforcement. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about the public charge. The public charge was something that was very much relevant to nonprofits that are providing services because it had a chilling effect that ignited fear among immigrant communities that were very much eligible for social service programs. In 2018, the Trump administration had proposed significant changes to the public charge rule, which determines whether someone seeking a green card or a visa to enter the country is likely to become primarily dependent on the government for support. The changes he had proposed was to expand the definition of specific use of programs and a higher threshold for financial self-sufficiency. The rule was finalized and it took effect in 2020, but then it was rescinded by Biden in 2021, taking it back to pre-2018 definition that focused on cash assistance and long-term institutional care. We will likely see this come back again, along with potential cuts to programs that U.S. citizen children of undocumented parents use. I wanted to highlight this website as a resource because there is going to be a lot of monitoring that we need to do in order to keep track of, what might happen and what is actually happening and how to best communicate that to our community. So I really recommend that you all look into, if you haven't already, the Protecting Immigrant Families Coalition. They already have a lot of fact sheets and useful resources that you can use to communicate with your communities about what is actually happening and things that you are monitoring in order to keep them informed on any potential changes. Next slide, please. To end, I know that the other speakers are going to be talking a little bit about rights and protections that are in place. But because I have the job of, sharing a lot of scary and doom feeling things, I wanted to end on something positive, that there are many protections in place in the state of Illinois. The Trust Act and the Illinois Way Forward Act, as I mentioned, are specific Illinois state laws that prohibit police and ICE to work together. That is something that we've heard from our governor, that they are willing to continue keeping in place, and that will be a huge protection for our communities in Illinois. There is also the RISE Act that provides in-state tuition for undocumented students. And there is also a local welcoming city ordinance in Chicago. I know this week there was some debate on what was staying in and what might be carved out as far as collaborations between ICE and the police. However, let's remember that Illinois does have that as a state law, so there would be some implications if the city violates that protection. Next slide, please. Lastly, I just want to say that there are organizations that are fighting back. There will be litigation efforts that will be deployed on many of these decisions that are attempted by the Trump administration. There are many advocacy groups, faith groups, and other community leaders and institutions that are speaking out. So the most important thing to remember is that there is a lot of anxiety and fear, but we are not sitting back. We are coming to the front lines and we are speaking with our communities, and we will do everything that we can in order to protect them. So I hope that I'm sure that the next presenters, I'm very glad that they're going after me so that they can provide you some more information on your rights and hopefully some additional support on ways that we can ourselves take care of ourselves so that we can be better prepared to take care of our communities as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dulce. We will take questions at the end, but please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box for us to keep track. Our next presenter, we have John De Lozano, who will provide some information on workers' rights, and we want to emphasize that these are rights that exist now for all of us, including the communities we serve. We know that during times where immigrants are targeted and they are vulnerable to other harm, especially in the workplace, and John can give us more guidance on how to support them. John, thank you.
Thanks, Gwendolyn. And if I can start with a few tedious attorney disclaimers, like Nubia said and Gwendolyn said when I was being introduced, I am here representing myself, not on behalf of any agency. Any views I express here are my own, and anything I say here is meant for information. It's not meant to provide legal advice. So a little bit of background for me, I'm a trial attorney at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the federal agency that is charged with enforcing federal anti-discrimination laws. Prior to working there, I worked at the Legal Assistance Foundation, now Legal Aid Chicago, as an employment attorney. So I'm going to focus my discussion today on federal anti-discrimination laws, but I will try to touch on other employment laws, state and federal employment laws. And of course, if you have questions, feel free to ask, and if I can answer them, I'd be happy to do so. So I'm going to start by talking about anti-discrimination laws and how they apply to undocumented and non-citizen workers. Then I'll talk through EEOC's complaint process. If you have a client or customer who believes that they're the victim of discrimination, what it would look like if they were to go forward with filing a charge. Discuss some of EEOC's policies regarding its position as a certifying agency for the U visa, and then briefly address some other employment laws that will apply to how they apply to undocumented workers. And echoing what Gwendolyn said, if there's one thing you can take away from my talk, it is that all workers, undocumented workers, non-citizen workers, are protected by federal anti-discrimination laws, regardless of documentation status. But in other words, undocumented workers cannot be discriminated against on the basis of race, gender, color, national origin, age, religion, disability. They are also protected from retaliation for asserting their statutorily protected rights. So if you have a client or a customer who feels that they're the victim of discrimination, they do have rights even if they are undocumented. Now, of course, there are some important caveats. Being undocumented itself is not a protected class. So often discrimination against undocumented folks comes along with national origin discrimination. Something else to keep in mind, alienage status, which is to say other forms of H-1B, other forms of work authorization for non-citizens, is not protected under Title VII or those particular body of anti-discrimination statutes. It is protected under the INA, and if you have a customer or a client who feels they're being discriminated on that basis, they can make a complaint to the Justice Department. So what is discrimination? And I want to run through this because it will help you identify whether this is something that you should refer your clients or customers to if they feel that they're being the victims of discrimination. So generally speaking, discrimination is an adverse employment action, which includes changes in terms and conditions of employment based on a protected status. Protected status is, race, gender, color, national origin, disability. Within gender, it also includes sexual orientation and gender identity, pregnancy, age discrimination. Also harassment under any of these laws. So, if a client or customer is being harassed on the basis of their membership in a protected class, that is also something that's protected under Title VII or one of the other associated federal anti-discrimination laws. And even if your client is undocumented, they would still be protected against. An adverse employment action, that includes termination, obviously, but can also include things like reassignments to worse jobs, reassignments at all. It can include, differences in pay, differences in benefits, those kinds of positions. Moving a person from a more prestigious to a less prestigious job, moving someone to a worse schedule on the basis of their membership in a protected. Retaliation is also protected. So if your client makes a report to their supervisor that they feel they are the victim of discrimination, and as a result, the employer takes an adverse employment action, they're also protected from that. A particular interest to undocumented workers and other non-citizen workers, retaliation can include retaliation based on making inquiries into immigration status, or threats to report your clients to immigration, or to subject them to other forms of consequence in that form because they've engaged in a protected activity. So if, for example, you have a client who tells you that they went to their job and they reported that one of their coworkers has been sexually harassing them, and their employer's response is to say, well, you know what, we never did an I-9 check, but now it's time. That can be a form of retaliation, and that is something that you can report. One thing I want to address, based on what Dulcie was talking about, she mentioned that the government, under the new administration, may rescind various immigration statuses. And I want to address what might be seen as tension here between what I just said and that statement. So these civil rights laws protect you from employer action. Of course, if the state or the government takes action against you or against your clients to rescind their status, then that will not necessarily be protected under Title VII, even though it might be protected under other laws. So what do you do if you have an undocumented client who thinks that they've suffered discrimination? If you can refer them to the EEOC, There are also state equivalent agencies in Illinois. It's the Illinois Department of Human Rights, and they enforce substantially a similar body of law, but actually the state protects a broader range of discrimination than the federal law does. There are also state and or county and local agencies that you can report this sort of discrimination to. But for now, I'm going to focus on addressing the EEOC and filing charges through that. So your client can file a charge, and in that charge, they would identify their employer, describe what they suffered, and explain why they believe that it's discrimination. At that point, the parties can agree to mediation. If they don't, then the case gets moved to investigation. The investigators will do interviews, request documents from your client. They will request documents from the respondent to try to get to the heart of the matter. And of important note here for undocumented workers, EEOC has a longstanding policy against making inquiries into a person's citizenship status, because again, the position that even undocumented workers are protected by these our anti-discrimination laws. So EEOC will not ask, and if your client or any of their representatives don't make EEOC aware of their citizenship status, it will not become part of the investigation. And this is a long-standing policy. Of course, I can't predict the future, but this policy has been in place since at least the second Bush administration. It survived the first Trump administration. So in my personal view, I don't anticipate that this is something that will change, but of course, we all know how, I don't claim to be Nostradamus here, so I won't try to predict, what will happen, but I think odds are it will continue to be EEOC's policy. During the investigation, your client can request a right to sue letter, and they can, if they don't want to wait for the investigation, then they can take their claim to court and enforce the law there. They can also allow the investigation to continue. If the investigators find that there is cause to believe that the discrimination happened, EEOC will engage in a process called conciliation, where they will try to get the respondent, the employer, to provide certain relief to the person who filed the charge. If they're unsuccessful in doing so, then again, they will provide a right to sue, and your client can take the right to sue letter and go to court on their own behalf with an attorney. And so that's sort of the process. And again, it is meant to be protective of individuals who are undocumented. And because of the laws apply to them as much as they apply to citizen workers, there's no, if your client feels that they're a victim of discrimination, they can make a charge. EEOC is also a certifying agency for the U&T visa. I won't go too much into the background of the U&T visa, but essentially what would happen if your client needs to make a request, or if you're making a request on their behalf, you can inform the investigator, and that request will be passed along to the legal department. Something to note is that in order to qualify for the U visa, there has to be a qualifying crime. And while some discrimination would count as qualifying crimes, like physical forms of harassment that amount to battery, other violations of EEOC's laws, like, for example, a failure to accommodate disability, likely would not qualify as a qualifying crime. EEOC also keeps requests for U&T visas confidential, and that's actually a statutory requirement that they cannot reveal that information to. That is also something that you can request, or that your clients can request, and still be protected by, and not have to worry about facing immigration consequences. So that's essentially how it works with federal anti-discrimination law. Something else to note, though, federal pay laws, like the Fair Labor Standards Act, which require a certain level of minimum wage, overtime payments, those also apply to undocumented workers. I believe workers' compensation applies to undocumented workers. And so in most cases, these broader statutory schemes will still protect undocumented workers or non-citizen workers, even if they don't have legal status to work.
Thank you so much, John. Michelle, as individuals, can you update us? I'm sorry, before I introduce Michelle, if everybody can please drop their questions in the Q&A. And now back to you, Michelle. As individuals, can you update us on what tools we have available for us, please? Thank you.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Garcia with the ACLU of Illinois. We protect people's constitutional rights, regardless of immigration status. And I just want to touch on one of the things the first speaker spoke about, Trump trying to revoke people's rights to citizenship. And I just want to say very clearly, the 14th Amendment says that all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States. And so it would be very challenging. In fact, there would be lawsuits from the ACLU for sure if there was some sort of executive order or statute. You can't override the Constitution. And to touch on some of the things that the first presenter said, to give context for I'm going to talk about how to advise your clients or general information to tell them about interacting with ICE. And I'm going to touch a little bit on what the first presenter said about the state and local law, mainly because although there's a lot of fear, you should know the ICE federal agency only has 21,000 employees. And that includes people that just are the secretaries, right? Are processing documents. They don't even have the thousands of agents really working to do a lot of the things that Trump is promising. And while the fears are real, I think just take a step back in thinking about, are these things actually going to happen? And then what sort of legal rights your clients have may kind of frame the fear and say, okay, this is something that's doable and that people have been living with for many decades through many presidential administrations. So in Illinois, the Illinois Trust Act provides that state and local police throughout the whole state cannot enforce federal immigration law. That means they cannot ask if someone is a citizen or about their immigration status. They can't stop, arrest, or search someone or keep someone because of their immigration status. It doesn't matter if there is a civil immigration warrant or an immigration detainer. They can't house someone in a local or county jail for an immigration-related offense, and they can't provide information to ICE about a person's release or contact information. The only exception if there's a federal criminal warrant, right, that a judge has signed. And in fact, in 2019, the ACLU sued two sheriffs of two counties, in Ogle and Stevenson, which are in southern Illinois, for violating the Trust Act. I'll give you an example of what happened. One of our clients was stopped. Our clients were stopped and arrested for minor traffic offenses. And then these sheriffs housed them and turned them over to ICE. And so, for example, Mr. Talapo skidded through a stop sign during an icy road, and he posted cash bond. All of our clients did, which should have meant that they should have been released by the sheriff's office. Instead, the sheriffs held them until ICE picked them up. But we sued and successfully challenged that under the Trust Act. And after our suit, the law was actually changed to clarify that sheriffs can't even have these contracts to house somebody, which these sheriffs were saying that we can hold on to them because we have a contract just to provide them housing. We're not doing anything other than that. And that's absolutely wrong and illegal under the Illinois Trust Act. Now, besides the Illinois Trust Act, which covers the state, in Chicago, we have our welcoming city ordinance. And that means that all city agencies and police officers cannot ask about a person's citizenship or immigration status, disclose someone's status, unless the person agrees in writing, arrest someone for an immigration offense. When given a matricula or a passport, they can't treat the person differently. They can't permit ICE agents to use city facilities or go to a jail to assess people. And they can't communicate with ICE unless there's a criminal warrant or felony conviction. With this in mind, the general advice when you're thinking and talking to your clients is that people should not voluntarily disclose their immigration or citizen status. And if you interact with state or local police, ask to see the badge. Ask to see the officer's name to verify who you're talking to. Now, under the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment, there are protections for all people, including non-citizens, to be free for what's known as an unreasonable search of their body, of their home, and seizures. And that includes arrests, And next, I'm going to talk about some of potential interactions that your clients may have or people may have with ICE at home and traffic stops in schools if we have time. The strongest protections are at home, in your apartment, your house, non-public areas, because you have a reasonable expectation of privacy. And the Fourth Amendment prohibits the state, and that includes and federal government, from invading that area. That means the Fourth Amendment does not allow ICE to enter your home, yard, porch without your permission, okay? A warrant of removal or deportation, and in the supplemental materials, I'll provide a sample of what that looks like. It's called a Form I-205. That's just a piece of paper. It does not allow ICE to enter your home without your permission, okay? That means if someone who says they're from ICE shows up at your door at someone's house or apartment, the general advice is stay calm and keep the door closed. You can ask to see identification through a window or a peephole to verify that they are not the police, okay? They are not state police, right? You have the right to remain silent. You don't have to talk to ICE, and you do not have to open the door. In contrast, with the police officer, right? They show you a badge. In order to enter your home, they have to show you a judicial warrant. That is a court document that's signed by a judge, right? To enter your home and have permission to search in your home. So, why is this important? Well, in 2020, ICE in Southern California, so this was under Trump, pretended to be police and went to people's homes to try to persuade them to open their doors and talk to agents. And when they came out, they arrested them for immigration offenses. The ICE agents wore flak jackets, tactical gear, had guns, and had the word police on their jackets. Okay, they knocked on the door, asked people to step outside, then arrested them for immigration offenses. The ACLU of Southern California, our sister organization, filed a class action suit because this lie and deception, which is called ruse, or you may hear the nickname of knock and talk. They knock on the door and say, hey, we just want to ask you some questions. Can you come outside and talk to us? And then they would arrest someone. Violated the Fourth Amendment because people didn't know that they were giving consent to this. They didn't know what was happening. On May 16th, 2024, the federal court granted the ACLU of Southern California's motion and found ICE's practice of knocking and talk, saying, hey, can you just come out and talk to me? Because I'm with the police and I have some questions, violated the Fourth Amendment. So to reiterate, it's if you're talking to clients about this sort of situation, they have the right to ask who's at their door and to ask for documentation and then decide not to go out, not to voluntarily give permission and to put themselves in possible harm's way. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about another way there could be a potential interaction, traffic stops. ICE can stop a car if they have reasonable suspicion that the person in the vehicle does not have a legal status based on actual facts, right? They know who's driving the car, they know their immigration status, they can stop the car, okay? But we do know that ICE has stopped cars without having this sort of legal basis under the law. And so your rights and people's rights under our U.S. Constitution is that if ICE asks about immigration status or citizen status, you have the right to remain silent. Don't lie. Don't provide fake documents or anything like that that will be used against you. If the officer asks to search the person or the car, you have the right to say no under the Fourth Amendment. You can ask if you are free to leave. And if you're not allowed, that means that you're going to be detained. And you should ask for the documentation. You can ask for a lawyer, and you should ask for the administrative warrant, the basis for them stopping you. The reason why this are important is that there's a settlement that the ACLU has right now against the Department of Human Services, against Department of Homeland Security, apologize, for actions that ICE took in 2018. It's called the Castañón-Nava settlement. And in our supplemental materials, we'll provide information that you can have to share with your clients. In May 2018, under Trump 1, Tom Homan, who is going to be the border czar under Trump 2, directed a raids and sweeps in the Chicagoland area. And ICE pretended to be traffic cops and stopped people, mainly because they appeared to be Latino. They stopped people without having that reasonable suspicion that that actual person in the car didn't have legal status based on any real facts, okay? And they arrested people beyond people that they could legally arrest for immigration offense. So what happened? Well, we heard about this through immigrant communities. We had 5 clients, and we filed suit along with the Illinois Coalition for Immigration and Refugee Rights, ICER, Organized Communities Against Deportation, and the National Immigrant Justice Center. And we challenged ICE's widespread and immigration sweeps in the Chicago area, which had resulted in the arrest of hundreds of people. In the case, we filed it in the Northern District of Illinois. We defeated the defendant's argument that we didn't have claims, and we settled the case in 2022. Under the settlement, there's a nationwide policy that's in effect through May 2025, okay? The settlement limits when ICE can stop people without having a warrant and specifies that they cannot stop people for basic traffic offenses. They have to have that reasonable suspicion that the person in the car is violating immigration law, okay? We will provide the supplemental materials to this because we want people to know about it if there's a mass raid, if there's mass traffic stops, because we can enforce the settlement, including getting people who've been detained to be released, including bringing a enforcement action in federal court against them if multiple people have been detained. So I will provide in the supplemental materials specific information about that settlement. We don't have time to go through all the ins and outs of it, but that's a significant protection that people will have. And lastly, I just wanted to raise schools, and I see that Gwendolyn's back on, so I suspect the next speaker is supposed to talk. Just wanted to raise up that under equal protection under the Constitution, meaning that everyone should be treated equally. All children, regardless of immigration status, have the right to an education through high school. And that's our federal courts rule. Our Supreme Court ruled that in 1982. And school records are confidential and cannot be disclosed unless the parents consent under federal and state law. I'm going to end it there because I know that my time is up. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for all that information. Finally, we have Dr. Medina. Dr. Medina, we've covered some heavy topics that raise concerns. Can you help us understand how to better address the anxiety we and our clients in the community are maybe feeling? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gwendolyn. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Dr. Beatriz Medina, and I am a psychotherapist at Mount Sinai Hospital in Chicago. And so I just briefly, there's so much we can cover, right, in terms of mental health and the impact that these potential changes can have on not just the folks that we work with, but also on ourselves, because we're working with them vicariously, right? And so I think the main overarching goal of my small spiel is to ask for help when you need help, and that it's okay to not be okay as well. I think we are all in professions or careers or positions that unfortunately expose us to human suffering and human pain, and so it's important that we model for our clients, for the people that we work with as well, how to take care of ourselves too, and so that they can do the same as well. So first and foremost, I think during this time, right, we're talking a lot about anxiety, but also I think depressive symptoms might be also possible as well. And so I think just talking about some of the symptoms that are related to anxiety and depression would be helpful. Um, so what I want to talk about first is depression and just go over a few symptoms that maybe you might be noticing the people that you work with or yourselves might be going through, or just to even make the communities aware of these symptoms. So oftentimes folks think about depression and they think immediately sadness, but it's not just sadness. It can also be a loss of enjoyment and interest in activities that they once enjoyed or that you once enjoyed. Folks will maybe sometimes experience fatigue, loss of energy, feeling very tired. Other times, especially with the climate of, the political climate and the chastising kind of rhetoric for our undocumented community, people will experience feelings of worthlessness or feeling guilty or feeling shame, even though it's not their fault. Some folks, unfortunately, will experience thoughts of death or wishing to be dead. Other folks will experience difficulties in concentration and focus or making decisions, even, and that's important to understand, especially in the midst of this climate. Other folks will have issues around sleep, and so some people may become agitated when they're trying to sleep, irritable when they're trying to sleep, and so they won't be able to go to sleep as easily or stay asleep. Other folks might sleep too much in an effort to kind of numb or detach from what's going on. And then there might be some noticeable changes in eating habits, sometimes resulting in weight gain or weight loss. And we should take things a little bit more seriously if we are finding that folks are experiencing these types of symptoms for 2 weeks or more, because that's when a more clinical depression might be setting in. In terms of anxiety, sometimes anxiety is something that we can readily observe. There's physical symptoms that folks can either see or they themselves are experiencing. And so there can be some cardiovascular physical symptoms, right? The pounding of the heart, chest pain, rapid heartbeat, flushing, right? Respiratory in terms of hyperventilation, shortness of breath. Some folks will experience neurological symptoms such as dizziness, headaches, sweating, tingling, numbness, things of that nature. Other folks will experience gastrointestinal issues like dry mouth, sometimes even choking on their own saliva or while they're trying to swallow food, stomach pains, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. And then other folks will experience skeletal issues such as muscle aches and pains, especially around the neck, the shoulders, and the back, because that's kind of where we carry all of this stress. Other folks might experience the shaking and the restlessness of their hands or their legs and feet, and there's like an inability to relax. And so this is something that can become very chronic. And of course, for the immigrant population and people of color, we tend to somaticize a lot. And so it's important to also have the awareness that folks will be more readily able to share sometimes the physical symptoms that they're experiencing because of the stigma that exists around mental health. And so if you're hearing, right, oh, I have this pain in my neck, or I've been having stomach issues ever since this whole thing started, or whatever, or you're noticing that in yourself. Have you talked to your doctor about that? Have you gone to see somebody about this? That's how you can start that conversation and encourage that person to see some kind of professional to see if there's anything else going on for them. Um, So that is in terms of, the anxiety symptoms, the depressive symptoms that we might be seeing. Um, so how do we navigate that ourselves, and how do we encourage our folks to also, take care of themselves? First and foremost, I think the media has a huge, huge, huge influence on our communities. I know that, I feel like most immigrant communities kind of watch the news, right? And they're like, just like ready to set it on the TV and the news and what's going on, right? I think that's culturally something that happens and across a lot of cultures. And so I think encouraging them and also ourselves to maybe sometimes limit that, because the way that the news delivers some of these messages can be very catastrophic. They might embezzle, they might, there's just like the freedom of just kind of delivering the story or the news as they see fit. And even when they're trying to do a very good, genuine, authentic job, it's still not a good thing to expose ourselves every single day to these like kind of bad news. And so it's good to be informed, yes, definitely, but also take care of yourself and be aware of how much is too much as well. With that being said, the news or the media is not the only place where we can get our information, right? And so encouraging folks to attend webinars, encouraging folks to attend meetings, encouraging folks to attend different, or I know there's going to be so many organizational events, right? Where there's going to be like a know your rights, how to take care of yourself during this time kind of events. Let's encourage our communities to attend those kinds of events so that they're getting their information from credible, legitimate, and in your face kind of resources, right? Because that, the distance between like the media, it's a big one. And so there's no sense of safety or security that I can just go and walk up to, for example, Gwendolyn, and just like send an email and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, can you help me? Or I need resources, right? So we want to make those connections for folks as well. Self-care is very incredibly important. And I say this with recognition that given the circumstances and given the folks that we work with, not everyone has the opportunity to practice self-care. Um, but yet that doesn't mean that I don't want to encourage it, right? And so telling folks to be able to ask for what they need, right? Telling folks to not be ashamed, right? To say, I need help with something. Telling them to take a 5-minute break, right? It does not have to be this this kind of event where it's like an hour long and it has to be every day. No, it can really honestly be something very, very small, but focused and intentional and purposeful. Sometimes those little small breaks can do a lot of things for us. Helping them identify who is in their social support network, right? Who do you have that you can lean on? Who can you talk to? Who can you run to? Um, Family wise, friend wise, spiritually, right? Spiritually, how are you taking care of yourself as well? How are you taking care of yourself in terms of physically? If obviously, like if you don't have a gym membership or something like that, well, okay, how are you exercising maybe at home for 5, 10 minutes, right? How do you release the stress, right? Helping them just identify how do you do that? And if they don't have any, resources or methods of doing that, well, let's help you figure out like what do you enjoy doing? What brings you joy? What brings you relaxation? Oh, well, I've never had time to relax. Okay, well, what would you like to try? Is there something that you would like to try? Do you like to pray? Do you like to draw? Do you like to journal? Do you like to listen to music? A hot shower, coffee, so there are little small things that we can help our folks identify to help them take care of themselves too. Um, and so what I want to leave you with is I'm going to share my screen briefly. I have this just a resource screen. If I could just share my screen, Gwendolyn. Okay. So I'm just going to share this slide briefly with resources. This is, here's the number for our adult clinic at Sinai. If folks need, if folks need to services for adults, we have our behavioral health clinic, and this is our direct number to that clinic. We also have the Child and Adolescent Clinic, which is under the rainbow, which is where I work, and that's the direct number. Um, I also have the 988 number, which I've come to find that not a lot of people are aware of this number, but this number is now kind of in lieu of the suicide prevention hotline. If you're familiar with the suicide prevention hotline, it's a very long 1-800 number. And so folks at the suicide prevention hotline wanted to make something easier, shorter, quicker to be able to remember it. So 988 is both in English and in Spanish. You can call if you are having yourself a crisis or you're going through something really, really difficult. Or if you are having, some type of crisis with somebody else as well, it's good for consultation. It's good to walk through things, if somebody's having a mental health crisis. I also shared 3 websites, which all of these I can send to Gwendolyn and so that people can click on the hyperlink. United We Dream on DocuHealth Initiative. They have just a bunch of really great resources in terms of how to get a doctor. Can I apply for, help, medical help, mental health help? There's also a really great website for children and children who are immigrants as well. And it's a really great toolkit in terms of helping them and understanding what's going on. And then this website called The Informed Immigrant, which also has just really great websites and resources. I also included the SAMHSA number, which is the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. They can help you with resources around the area. NAMI Chicago as well can help you with resources around the area. And as well as myself, I can serve as a resource as well. And if you need help figuring things out in terms of the mental health field, please, please, please feel free to reach out. So I know that was a lot. I hope that that was helpful to some degree. But if you would like further presentations or further information or webinars on mental health, that's something that we do. We do mental health webinars. We can create them. We can deliver them. We also do mental health first aid trainings as well. And we can offer them both in English and in Spanish as well. So thank you all.
Thank you so much for sharing all this information. We do have a lot of questions, and we promise you we're going to compile all this information and be able to send it in a follow-up with the links and everything that the presenters have shared, the presenters' information as well. I think since we're almost at time, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions, and then again, we'll send it out. Can federal government change state policy protections? Any of the presenters?
Sorry, go ahead.
Would you go ahead, Jonathan. I would say it kind of depends on the protection, but generally no. Our Constitution has a real separation of powers and what the state can do and what the federal government can do. So and that's one of the reasons why ICE we've been able as a state to say that we're not going to assist with immigration enforcement, right? That is something that the federal government has the authority to do under the Constitution. So generally, no, it kind of depends on the very specific protection involved. And I think, Jonathan, you clicked on, so I think you might have a better sense of, particularly for employment.
Sure. Yeah. I just want to echo that. I think because of separation of powers, generally speaking, no. And in the particular employment context, federal government could not sort of limit the protections that state provides under state law, generally speaking.
Thank you. Oh. Sorry, thank you both so much. One more question. Could the Trump administration get rid of EEOC via the executive order?
No, because EEOC it's a great question, but EEOC is established by statute and is an independent federal commission, so it could not be gotten rid of by executive order. It would take an act of Congress.
Thank you. Well, I mean, we want to respect everyone's time. But we don't want to leave without thanking everyone and each one of our speakers for their information. It was such a valuable information, for all your support. Thank you all to the thank you to all the attendees. We appreciate your interest and dedication in helping make our community stronger. We will follow up with any additional links and resources, just like I previously mentioned, as well as the recording for you to share. If there are any questions, please reach out to legal@latinospro.org. And additionally, our legal services team is here to provide consultations and support. And I hope that we can continue to collaborate and face whatever it is to come, but to do it together. Thank you all. Have a great day.